Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. This is a journey about family, self-worth, and discovering what true beauty really means. Enjoy the story. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I'm 52 years old. For the past 22 years, I've been both father and mother to my daughter Riley, and I thought I'd done a pretty good job. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was especially wrong about what my daughter really thought of me. The day that shattered my world was May 15th, Riley's high school graduation. I'd been looking forward to this moment for months. My baby girl was graduating valedictorian, heading to college on a full scholarship, and I was bursting with pride. I'd saved up for months to buy a new camera, planning to capture every moment of this milestone. The ceremony was beautiful. Riley looked stunning in her cap and gown, and when they called her name to give the valedictorian speech, I was the loudest person cheering in that auditorium. My daughter, the brilliant one, the one I'd sacrificed everything for. After the ceremony, families were gathering outside for photos. I watched other parents posing with their graduates, everyone smiling and celebrating. This was the moment I'd been dreaming about, father and daughter, commemorating her achievement together. I approached Riley with my camera ready, my heart full of love and pride. She was surrounded by her friends, all of them taking selfies and posting to their social media accounts immediately. These kids lived their lives through their phones, documenting every moment for their followers. "Riley, honey, let's get some pictures together," I said, holding up my camera with a big smile. She turned around, and the look on her face. I'll never forget it. It wasn't embarrassment or teenage annoyance. It was pure horror, like I just asked her to do something disgusting. "Dad, no," she said, but not quietly. Her voice was loud enough for her friends and nearby families to hear. "Come on, sweetheart. Just a few photos. It's your graduation day." I said no. Riley's voice got louder, sharper. "Dad, you're not good looking enough to be in my photos." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around us, conversations stopped. Parents and students turned to stare. "Riley, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not photogenic. My friends follow me on Instagram, on TikTok, on Snapchat. I have thousands of followers. I can't post pictures with you because look at you." She gestured at my face with disgust, and I instinctively touched the scars that ran from my left temple down to my jawline. The scars I'd gotten 22 years ago in the car accident that ended my modeling career and changed everything about my life. "Honey, these are family photos. For us, not for social media." "Everything goes on social media, Dad. That's how life works now. And I can't have my followers seeing me with someone who looks like you." The cruelty in her voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from my daughter. This was the little girl I'd raised alone, the child I'd worked 3 jobs to support, the teenager I'd driven to every school event and cheered for at every competition. "Riley, I'm your father. I know exactly who you are. And I'm embarrassed by how you look. My friends already think it's weird that I never post about my family. Now they'll know why." She turned to her friends, who were all staring with a mixture of shock and second-hand embarrassment. "Come on, guys, let's go take real pictures. Ones I can actually post." They walked away, leaving me standing there with my camera, surrounded by families who'd witnessed my daughter's public rejection of me. I felt every eye on my scars, every whisper about what they'd just seen. I managed to get to my car before the tears started. 22 years of single parenthood, of sacrifice, of unconditional love, and my daughter was ashamed to be seen with me because of how I looked. That night, I sat in my living room looking at the walls covered with photos of Riley growing up. Every school play, every birthday, every achievement, I was there for all of it. But in none of those photos was I smiling confidently. In every single one, I was turned slightly to hide my scars, or the lighting was positioned to minimize their appearance. Had I taught my daughter to be ashamed of how I looked by being ashamed myself? 2 days later, something happened that would change everything. I got a phone call from a lawyer in Boston telling me that my great-uncle Theodore, a man I'd met maybe 3 times in my life, had died and left me his entire estate. $12 million. $12 million from a man who barely knew me, while my own daughter couldn't stand to be photographed with me. I hung up the phone and made a decision. I wasn't going to tell Riley about the money. Not yet. First, I wanted to understand something. I wanted to know if my daughter's rejection was really about my appearance, or if there was something deeper going on. I wanted to see how she treated me when she thought I had nothing to offer except a father's love. And based on what had happened at graduation, I had a feeling that test was going to be more revealing than I was prepared for. But I also knew that with $12 million, I had options I'd never had before. I could change my life, help other people, maybe even change how my daughter saw the world. First, though, I needed to understand exactly what kind of person I'd raised. And whether the beautiful, brilliant daughter I'd sacrificed everything for could learn to see past the surface of things. The answers to those questions would determine how I used my unexpected fortune. And they would determine whether Riley and I had any kind of future together. Sitting in my living room after that devastating phone call from the lawyer, my mind drifted back to the day that changed everything, not just for me, but apparently for how my daughter would see me for the rest of our lives. I was 30 years old and working as a model for a mid-tier agency in Chicago. Nothing glamorous like Fashion Week or magazine covers, but steady work doing catalog shoots and local advertisements. I wasn't Brad Pitt, but I had what photographers called an interesting face, strong jawline, expressive eyes, the kind of look that sold everything from cologne to furniture. More importantly, the modeling paid well enough that I could pursue my real dream of opening a photography studio. I'd been saving money for 2 years, planning to make the transition from being in front of the camera to being behind it. That's when I met Linda, Riley's mother. She was a makeup artist on one of my shoots, and she was everything I thought I wanted: beautiful, ambitious, connected in the industry. We had a whirlwind romance that led to marriage within 6 months. When Linda got pregnant with Riley, I was over the moon. I started taking on more modeling jobs, saving every penny for our growing family. I imagined teaching my child about art and photography, sharing my love of capturing beautiful moments. Then came March 15, 2001. I was driving home from a shoot in Milwaukee when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at 50 miles per hour. The impact sent my car rolling 3 times before it came to rest upside down in a ditch. I spent 4 months in the hospital. Multiple surgeries on my face, my jaw, my left eye socket. The doctors did their best, but when the bandages finally came off, the man in the mirror was a stranger. 3 jagged scars ran from my left temple down to my chin. My left eye drooped slightly from nerve damage. My smile, which had been my signature feature in photographs, was now crooked and hesitant. The modeling career ended immediately, of course. Who wants to buy a product from someone who looks like they've been through a war? But I told myself it didn't matter because I had my family, and soon I'd have my photography business. Linda tried to be supportive at first. She said the right things about how I was still the same person inside, how my appearance didn't matter to her. But I could see her struggling with it. When we went out together, she'd position herself so people saw her good side while I stayed in the shadows. She stopped posting photos of us together on social media, saying she wanted to keep our relationship private. Riley was born 3 months after my final surgery. Holding my daughter for the first time, seeing her perfect tiny face, I thought everything would be okay. Love would be enough to overcome everything else. But Linda's struggle with my changed appearance gradually became something worse. She started making comments about how children at Riley's daycare might react to me. She suggested that maybe I should pick Riley up from the back entrance so the other parents wouldn't stare. She worried that my scars might frighten other children. By the time Riley was 2, Linda was openly talking about how my appearance was holding her back professionally. Makeup artists in the entertainment industry needed to network, attend parties, be seen with the right people. Having a husband who looked like me wasn't helping her career. The divorce came when Riley was 3. Linda said she needed to find herself and pursue opportunities in Los Angeles. She moved across the country, leaving me with full custody and the responsibility of raising our daughter alone. I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I started a small photography business doing family portraits and local events. The money wasn't great, but it was enough to provide for Riley. More importantly, it kept me behind the camera instead of in front of it. Riley grew up beautiful, just like her mother. As she got older, people would comment on how stunning she was, how she could be a model herself. Teachers, neighbors, strangers in grocery stores, everyone noticed Riley's looks. And as Riley became more aware of her own beauty, she also became more aware of my lack of it. I first noticed it when she was 12. We were at a school concert where she was performing, and I was taking pictures of her with my professional camera. After the show, she asked me why I was always behind the camera instead of in front of it like other parents. When I explained that I preferred taking pictures to being in them, she studied my face with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "Is it because of your scars, Daddy?" I told her that my scars were part of who I was, that they told the story of surviving something difficult. She nodded like she understood, but I could see her processing the idea that her father was different from other fathers. By high school, Riley had developed what I thought was a healthy confidence about her appearance. She was popular, successful, involved in every social activity. I was proud of how poised and self-assured she'd become. What I didn't realize was that her confidence was built on a foundation of comparisons. She wasn't just proud of being beautiful, she was proud of being more beautiful than other people. And somewhere along the way, that mindset had extended to being embarrassed by anyone who didn't meet her standards of attractiveness, including her own father. Looking back now, I could see the signs I'd missed. The way she'd steer conversations away from family when her friends were around. How she'd always have excuses when I offered to drive her and her friends places. The careful way she cropped me out of photos we took together, or how she'd convince me to take pictures of her instead of asking someone else to take pictures of us together. I'd interpreted all of this as normal teenage behavior, the natural desire for independence. I never imagined it was because she was ashamed of how I looked. But now, sitting in my living room with $12 million in my bank account and the memory of my daughter's public rejection still burning in my chest, I realized I needed to understand something crucial. Had I failed as a father by not teaching Riley that appearance was less important than character? Or was there something else going on, some influence in her life that had twisted her values so completely? I was about to find out. And with the resources I now had available, I was going to make sure I understood exactly who my daughter had become, and why. Because the Riley who had humiliated me at graduation wasn't the child I thought I'd raised. And I needed to know if the real Riley was still in there somewhere, or if I'd lost her completely. Over the next few weeks, I made a decision that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. I was going to hide my inheritance and observe how Riley treated me when she believed I had nothing to offer except paternal love. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Riley had moved into a dorm room for summer classes, and our communication became sporadic at best. When she did call or text, it was always to ask for something: money for textbooks, gas for her car, spending money for social activities. Never once did she ask how I was doing or mention wanting to spend time together. I decided to test this pattern by suggesting we meet for lunch one afternoon when she was back in town. Her response was immediate and telling. "Dad, I'm really busy with my influencer stuff. Can you just Venmo me money for food instead?" Influencer stuff. Riley had started building a social media presence during her senior year of high school, and apparently this had become her primary focus. I didn't really understand the world of social media influence, but I knew it involved posting photos and videos of yourself to gain followers and eventually make money from sponsorships. I visited Riley's Instagram account for the first time in months and was shocked by what I found. Her feed was a carefully curated collection of photos showcasing her beauty, professional quality shots of her face, her outfits, her lifestyle. She had over 50,000 followers, and the comments were filled with praise for her looks. But what disturbed me most was scrolling through 2 years of posts and not finding a single photo that included me. Birthday celebrations, family holidays, graduation, all the major moments of her life were documented, but I'd been systematically erased from her public narrative. I decided to do some investigating. I created a fake social media account and started following Riley's friends and classmates. What I discovered made my heart sink. Riley had been telling people that her father was dead. Not metaphorically, not in some dramatic teenage way, literally dead. She'd created an entire backstory about being raised by a single mother who had died when she was 16, leaving her to navigate the world alone. This fictional tragedy explained why she never posted family photos and why she seemed so independent and mature. The lie was elaborate and consistent across multiple social platforms. She'd even created fake memorial posts about her deceased parents that had received hundreds of sympathetic comments from friends and followers. I sat in my home office, staring at posts where my daughter mourned parents who never existed, while her real father, the one who'd raised her alone, sacrificed his dreams for her education, loved her unconditionally, was treated like he was already dead. But the worst discovery came when I found a group chat thread that Riley had screenshot and posted to her close friend's story. The conversation was between her and several college friends discussing their family embarrassments. One girl complained about her mother's weight. Another mocked her father's receding hairline. And Riley had written, "At least your parents are just ugly. Mine has actual scars on his face from some accident. I literally can't be seen in public with him without people staring." She'd turned my pain, my trauma, the accident that had changed both our lives, into a source of social embarrassment to share with friends for entertainment. I needed to understand how deep this behavior went, so I decided to test Riley directly. I called her and suggested that we attend a local food festival together, something we used to enjoy when she was younger. "Dad, no. I can't be seen at public events with you. What if someone takes photos? What if they end up online?" "Riley, it's just a local festival. Your friends won't be there. That's not the point. Anyone could be there. Anyone could post pictures on social media. I've worked too hard building my image to risk it now." Building her image. My daughter had turned her entire life into a brand, and I was a liability to that brand. What if I stayed in the background? What if I promised not to be in any photos? "Dad, you don't understand. Just being associated with you hurts my credibility as an influencer. My followers expect a certain aesthetic from me." I hung up that phone call feeling like I'd lost my daughter completely. The child I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone who valued social media metrics more than family relationships. But I needed to understand if this was entirely Riley's choice or if someone else was influencing her thinking. So I hired a private investigator, Elena Vasquez, to look into my daughter's social circles and online activities. What Elena discovered explained a lot. Riley had fallen in with a group of aspiring influencers who treated social media success like a competitive sport. They spent hours analyzing each other's content, strategizing about follower growth, and critiquing anything that might hurt their online image. The group had an informal leader named Madison Pierce, a 20-year-old with over 200,000 followers who made money promoting fashion and beauty products. Madison had apparently taken Riley under her wing, coaching her on how to build her personal brand. Elena showed me screenshots of private conversations where Madison had explicitly advised Riley to distance herself from family members who didn't fit her image. "Your brand is aspirational beauty," Madison had written. "Your followers want to see perfection. Anything that breaks that illusion damages your earning potential." Madison had suggested that Riley either upgrade her family situation by finding more photogenic relatives to feature, or simply avoid posting family content altogether. The dead parent story had apparently been Madison's idea, a way to generate sympathy while avoiding the need to explain an unphotogenic father. I was looking at evidence that my daughter's cruelty wasn't entirely her own. She'd been coached by someone who saw family relationships as marketing opportunities and human beings as props for social media content. But even knowing that Riley was being influenced by toxic people didn't excuse her choices. She was 19 years old, smart enough to know right from wrong, old enough to understand that her actions had consequences. The question was whether I could find a way to reach the daughter I'd raised, or if she was too far gone into this world of superficial values and manufactured image. With $12 million at my disposal, I had options for testing this. I could reveal my wealth and see if money changed how she treated me. I could use my resources to expose the people who were influencing her. or I could find another way to show her what really mattered in life. But first, I needed to know just how deep Riley had gone into this world of image obsession. And I had a feeling that what I'd discovered so far was just the beginning. 2 months after discovering Riley's lies about me being dead, something unexpected happened. She called me on a Thursday evening, her voice warm and affectionate in a way I hadn't heard in over a year. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I owe you an apology." My heart jumped. Maybe my daughter was finally coming back to me. Maybe the influence of those toxic friends was wearing off. "I've been awful to you, and I'm sorry. I got caught up in this social media world and lost sight of what's really important." "Riley, that means everything to me to hear you say that. I've been talking to some older influencers who have real careers, and they all say the same thing: authenticity is what matters. Being real with your audience, not just posting perfect photos all the time." She sounded so mature, so thoughtful. I started to believe that my daughter had grown up, had learned from her mistakes. "I want to start over with you, Dad. I want us to have a real relationship again. Maybe I could even start featuring you in some of my content, showing people that real families aren't perfect, that real love means accepting people as they are." For the first time in months, I felt hope. Riley was talking about acceptance, about real love, about the values I'd tried to teach her growing up. "I'd like that very much, sweetheart. There's just one thing, Dad. I need to ask you for help with something, and it's kind of expensive." There it was. The request that was surely coming. But I tried to stay optimistic. Maybe she genuinely needed help, and maybe asking me meant she trusted me again. "What do you need?" "I need surgery, Dad. Facial surgery." I know it sounds superficial, but it's not what you think. My stomach dropped. "What kind of surgery?" "It's reconstructive work. I've been having some problems with my jaw alignment that are affecting my speech. It's medical, but it also might help with my career." Riley explained that she'd been experiencing pain and difficulty speaking clearly during her video content. The surgery would cost $15,000, and her student insurance wouldn't cover it because it was considered partially cosmetic. "I know it's a lot of money, Dad, and I know you've already done so much for me. But this isn't about vanity. This is about my health and my future." The way she explained it sounded reasonable, almost noble. She was taking care of a medical issue that would also help her career. She was being practical and honest about needing my help. "Riley, if you really need this surgery, we'll figure out a way to make it work." "Really? Dad, you have no idea what this means to me. I've been so worried about the pain, about how it's affecting my work." We talked for over an hour that night, the longest conversation we'd had in months. Riley seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking about my photography business, my health, even my thoughts on current events. It felt like having my daughter back. Over the next few days, Riley sent me information about the surgery, including consultations with doctors and payment plans. Everything looked legitimate, and her enthusiasm about rebuilding our relationship seemed genuine. I was seriously considering not just paying for the surgery, but also revealing my inheritance to Riley. If she was really changing, really learning to value our relationship over her image, then maybe it was time to share this life-changing news with her. But something Elena Vasquez had taught me during her investigation stuck in my mind: when someone's behavior changes dramatically and quickly, especially when money is involved, it's worth looking deeper before making major decisions. So I decided to do a little investigating of my own before committing to the surgery payment. I called the doctor's office that Riley had mentioned and asked some basic questions about the procedure she described. The receptionist was helpful, but when I described Riley's symptoms, she seemed confused. "Sir, jaw alignment issues that affect speech would typically be handled by an oral surgeon, not a plastic surgeon. Dr. Hamilton specializes in facial aesthetics." I asked to speak with Dr. Hamilton directly, explaining that I was considering paying for my daughter's procedure and wanted to understand the medical necessity. Dr. Hamilton was professional but honest. "Mr. Sullivan, your daughter consulted with us about a rhinoplasty and chin augmentation. She mentioned some discomfort, but our examination didn't reveal any medical issues that would require surgical intervention. Rhinoplasty and chin augmentation. A nose job and chin surgery. Purely cosmetic procedures that Riley had described as medical necessities. Doctor, did my daughter mention why she wanted these procedures? She said she was unhappy with inherited facial features and wanted to improve her appearance for professional reasons. It's quite common among young women in the entertainment and social media industries. Inherited facial features. Riley wanted surgery to change the parts of her face that reminded her of me. That evening, I did some more research into Riley's recent social media activity. Elena had shown me how to use various online tools to dig deeper into social platforms, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. Riley had been posting in private forums for aspiring influencers, asking for advice about fixing genetic flaws and overcoming family genetics. She'd shared photos of herself asking for suggestions about what cosmetic procedures would help her career. In one particularly painful thread, she'd posted a side-by-side comparison photo, her face next to a childhood picture of me before the accident, asking how to avoid looking like the masculine side of the family. The responses were brutal and specific. Suggestions for nose surgery to narrow the inherited width, chin work to feminize the strong jawline, even recommendations for preventative procedures to avoid aging like her father. Riley wasn't getting surgery for medical reasons. She wasn't even getting surgery purely for career advancement. She was getting surgery to erase any physical resemblance to me, to ensure that no one would ever look at her face and see traces of her father. The $15,000 she was asking me to pay would be used to surgically remove me from her appearance, just like she'd already removed me from her social media presence and her personal history. I sat in my home office that night, looking at the inheritance paperwork that had changed my life, and realized that my daughter's apparent change of heart was just another manipulation. She hadn't learned to value our relationship, she'd learned to be more subtle about using me. But this time, I wasn't going to be the supportive father who enabled her cruelty. This time, I was going to make sure Riley understood exactly what her choices were costing her. And with $12 million at my disposal, I had some very interesting options for teaching her that lesson. After discovering the truth about Riley's surgery plans, I couldn't bring myself to confront her immediately. Instead, I spent the weekend digging deeper into her online activity, and what I found was so much worse than I'd imagined. Elena had taught me how to access archived social media content and deleted posts, and I discovered that Riley's cruelty toward me went back much further than I'd realized. She'd been systematically humiliating me online for over 2 years. The first post started during her junior year of high school. She'd created what she called Cringe Parent Chronicles, a series of memes and stories mocking fathers who were embarrassing to be seen with. The posts never mentioned me by name, but the details were unmistakably about our relationship. One particularly viral post showed a photo of a father and daughter at a school event, with the father's face blurred out. Riley had captioned it, "When your dad insists on coming to public events but you literally cannot be seen with him without dying of secondhand embarrassment." The post had received over 30,000 likes and hundreds of comments from other teenagers sharing their own stories about cringe parents. Riley had responded to many of these comments with increasingly specific details about her unfortunate genetic situation. But the content that really devastated me was a series she'd created called DNA Damage Control. These posts were advice columns where Riley shared tips for overcoming bad family genetics and building your brand despite family disadvantages. In one post, she'd written, "Just because your parents made questionable life choices doesn't mean you have to live with the consequences forever. Modern medicine can fix almost anything if you're willing to invest in yourself." Another post advised followers to document everything you want to change about yourself, then research which procedures can help you avoid looking like the worst parts of your family tree. The most painful discovery was a video she'd posted to her close friend's story where she'd filmed herself looking in the mirror, pointing out features she'd inherited from the wrong side of the family, and explaining her correction plan. She'd pointed to her nose, calling it too masculine like my father's, then her jawline, describing it as too strong and unfeminine. She'd even criticized her eye shape, saying she needed to soften the genetic damage before it became more pronounced with age. Watching my daughter analyze her face like it was a collection of flaws to be fixed, describing her resemblance to me as genetic damage, was more painful than any physical injury I'd ever experienced. But what made it worse was the engagement these posts received. Hundreds of young women commenting with their own lists of features they wanted to change, their own plans for erasing traces of parents they found embarrassing, their own stories of feeling cursed by family genetics. Riley had built her entire social media following on a foundation of self-hatred and family rejection. Her audience didn't follow her just because she was beautiful, they followed her because she'd turned the process of rejecting and changing herself into content that made other insecure young people feel less alone. I discovered that Riley had been working with Madison Pierce to develop her brand around genetic optimization and family transcendence. They were planning to document Riley's entire surgical transformation, turning her rejection of me into a sponsored content series. The plan was elaborate and calculated. Riley would get multiple procedures over the course of a year, documenting each step and promoting the surgeons, skincare products, and recovery services involved. She'd already been contacted by several cosmetic surgery practices interested in featuring her transformation. The tagline for her planned series was, "From Family Genetics to Personal Aesthetics, How I Took Control of My DNA." But the detail that finally broke my heart was an email thread between Riley and Madison discussing the backstory for her transformation series. Since Riley had told her followers that her parents were dead, they needed to explain why she was suddenly getting surgery to change inherited features. Madison had suggested that Riley reveal she'd recently discovered photos of her deceased father and realized how much she looked like him, inspiring her to honor her mother's memory by emphasizing her maternal features through surgery. Riley loved this idea. She was planning to use my actual photo, the one from before my accident, when I was still modeling, as the before inspiration for her transformation. She would tell her followers that seeing how masculine and harsh her father's features were had motivated her to surgically enhance her feminine qualities. My daughter was going to use my face as the negative example in her transformation story, turning me into a cautionary tale about genetics she needed to escape from. The surgery she'd asked me to fund wasn't just about changing her appearance, it was the foundation for a content series that would publicly humiliate me to hundreds of thousands of people, even though they'd never know the man being mocked was her living father. I printed out everything I'd found and sat in my living room, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's calculated cruelty. This wasn't teenage rebellion or social media addiction. This was systematic dehumanization of her own father for profit and attention. I thought about the phone call where she'd apologized, where she'd talked about authenticity and real love and accepting people as they are. Every word had been a lie, carefully crafted to manipulate me into funding her public rejection of me. But I also thought about the $12 million sitting in my bank account, and the power it gave me to expose Riley's lies and teach her about consequences. My daughter thought she was using me. She thought I was just a lonely, scarred man desperate for her love, willing to pay any price for her attention. She had no idea that the father she was planning to surgically erase from her face had the resources to reveal exactly who she really was to the world she cared so much about impressing. The question was no longer whether I could save my relationship with Riley. The question was whether I could save Riley from herself before her cruelty destroyed any chance of her becoming a decent human being. And for the first time since discovering her lies, I felt something other than heartbreak. I felt determined to fight for the daughter I'd raised, even if it meant fighting against the person she'd become. After confronting Riley about the real nature of her surgery, our relationship collapsed completely. I had called her and calmly explained that I knew about the cosmetic procedures, about the DNA damage control content, about her plans to use my face as negative inspiration for her transformation series. Her response was immediate and vicious. So what if I want to look better? So what if I don't want to look like you? Dad, you're a walking advertisement for everything I don't want to be in life. Riley, I'm your father. I love you unconditionally, regardless of how either of us looks. Well, maybe that's your problem. Maybe you should care more about how you look. Maybe you should care about how your appearance affects other people's lives. The conversation escalated quickly into the worst fight we'd ever had. Riley accused me of being selfish for wanting her to stay ugly just to make me feel better about myself. She said I was jealous of her beauty and success, that I was trying to hold her back because I'd never achieved anything meaningful with my life. You had one career and lost it because of an accident. I'm building something bigger than you ever dreamed of, and you can't stand it. I'm proud of your success, Riley. I just wish it didn't require you to hate where you came from. Where I came from is holding me back. Don't you understand that? Every day I don't get surgery is another day I look more like you, another day my brand suffers because of genetic associations I can't control. She hung up on me that night, and I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks. When Riley finally contacted me again, it was through a lawyer. She had decided to legally change her name from Riley Sullivan to Riley Pierce, taking Madison's last name. She was also filing paperwork to have me removed as her emergency contact and medical decision-maker. The legal documents were devastating to read. Riley had sworn under oath that I was unstable and obsessively controlling regarding her medical decisions. She claimed that I had threatened to cut off financial support unless she agreed to remain physically unchanged to preserve family resemblance. Every loving gesture I'd ever made, every expression of concern for her well-being, had been reframed as psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. But the most painful part was a statement Riley had written explaining why she needed legal protection from me. My father's appearance has been a source of shame and social limitation my entire life. His attempts to prevent me from addressing these genetic disadvantages constitute a form of psychological control that threatens my personal and professional development. She had turned my scars, my accident, my struggle with self-acceptance, into evidence that I was a harmful influence on her life. The lawyer also delivered a cease and desist letter demanding that I stop monitoring Riley's social media activity and stop interfering with her business relationships. Apparently, Riley had discovered that I'd been investigating her online content, and she'd interpreted this as stalking and harassment. Elena Vasquez helped me understand the legal implications. Riley was essentially preparing to sever all family ties and protect herself from any potential claims I might have on her future earnings. She was treating our father-daughter relationship like a business partnership she wanted to dissolve. Mr. Sullivan, I've seen family conflicts before, but this level of systematic rejection is unusual. Your daughter isn't just distancing herself from you, she's building a legal case to justify that distance. The isolation that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced since Linda left. But this was worse because it was my own child choosing to erase me from her life, not because of circumstances or differences, but because she was ashamed of my existence. I spent weeks alone in my house, looking at childhood photos of Riley and trying to understand where I'd gone wrong. Had I been too accepting of her beauty obsession? Should I have been stricter about social media use? Had my own insecurities about my appearance somehow taught her that looks were more important than character? The silence from Riley was complete. No birthday call, no response to messages I sent about family matters, no acknowledgement that I existed. She had achieved what she'd always wanted, a life where her father was truly dead to her. But during those lonely weeks, I also had time to think about what Elena had discovered about the broader context of Riley's behavior. This wasn't just about teenage vanity or social media pressure. My daughter was part of a toxic ecosystem that treated family relationships as disposable obstacles to personal branding. I started researching the influencer industry more deeply, trying to understand how young people like Riley got so lost in image obsession. What I found was disturbing. The pressure to maintain perfect aesthetics was driving thousands of young people to extreme measures, not just cosmetic surgery, but complete reinvention of their identities and histories. Riley wasn't unique in rejecting her family for her brand. She was part of a trend where young influencers routinely distanced themselves from anyone who didn't enhance their image, including parents, siblings, and childhood friends. Madison Pierce, who had become Riley's mentor and legal guardian, had built her own following partly by creating fictional stories about her background. The aspirational lifestyle content that made money required influencers to present themselves as naturally blessed with beauty, wealth, and success. Having ordinary or flawed family members complicated that narrative. I realized that Riley hadn't just rejected me personally. She'd been coached to reject anyone who didn't serve her brand, to view family relationships as marketing opportunities rather than sources of love and support. But I also realized that with $12 million, I had options that most parents in my situation didn't have. I could choose to accept Riley's rejection and build a new life without her. I could use my resources to expose the toxic industry that had corrupted her values. Or I could find a way to fight for my daughter, to show her what she was throwing away before it was too late. The question was whether the Riley I'd raised still existed somewhere underneath the influencer persona she'd created, or whether she was truly lost to this world of superficial values and manufactured identity. I was about to find out. And I was going to make sure that when I fought for my daughter, I fought with everything I had. Because losing Riley to her own cruelty wasn't just my tragedy, it was a waste of everything good I'd tried to build in her character. And I wasn't ready to give up on that yet. The weeks of isolation had given me time to think, but they'd also made me realize that I needed help understanding what had happened to my daughter. I couldn't solve this problem alone, and I couldn't fix it with money alone either. I needed to understand the psychology behind Riley's behavior and the industry that had shaped her values. I started by hiring Dr. Amanda Foster, a psychologist who specialized in social media addiction and family estrangement. Dr. Foster had written extensively about how digital platforms were affecting young people's relationships with their families, and I hoped she could help me understand whether Riley's behavior was reversible. During our first session, Dr. Foster reviewed everything I discovered about Riley's online activity. She studied the progression of her content, the language she used to describe family relationships, and the community she built around rejecting her origins. Mr. Sullivan, what your daughter is experiencing isn't uncommon in the influencer world. When young people build their identity around external validation, family members often become obstacles rather than sources of support. But the level of cruelty, the systematic humiliation, that suggests deeper psychological issues. Your daughter isn't just seeking independence or building a career. She's demonstrating symptoms of what we call image-dependent personality disorder, a condition where self-worth becomes entirely dependent on external appearance and social validation. Dr. Foster explained that people with this condition often develop a hatred of anything that reminds them of their perceived flaws, including family members who share physical characteristics or represent a past self they want to escape. The surgery your daughter is planning isn't just cosmetic. In her mind, it's psychological self-preservation. She believes that looking like you threatens her sense of self-worth. But Dr. Foster also believed that this condition was treatable, especially if we could identify and address the external influences that were reinforcing Riley's distorted thinking. The mentor figure you mentioned, Madison Pierce, she's likely the key to your daughter's transformation. These toxic relationships often drive the most extreme behaviors. I decided to investigate Madison more thoroughly. Elena Vasquez had provided basic information about her influence on Riley, but I wanted to understand her background and motivations more completely. What I discovered was disturbing. Madison Pierce wasn't just an influencer, she was running what amounted to a cult for young women obsessed with physical perfection. She had created a private online community called The Transformation Project, where she coached dozens of young women through extreme makeovers that often included cutting ties with family members. Madison's own story was revealing. She'd grown up in poverty with parents who struggled with addiction and mental illness. Instead of processing those childhood traumas healthily, she'd reinvented herself completely, building a fictional background as the daughter of wealthy entrepreneurs who had died in a tragic accident. Her entire brand was built on the idea that you could escape genetic and social disadvantages through cosmetic enhancement and strategic lying. She charged young women thousands of dollars for coaching programs that taught them how to optimize their genetics and transcend their family limitations. Riley wasn't Madison's first protege to completely reject her family. Elena found evidence of at least 12 other young women who had followed Madison's coaching and ended up estranged from their parents. Some had taken out massive loans to fund cosmetic procedures. Others had created elaborate fictional backgrounds to explain their transformations. Most disturbingly, Madison was profiting from these family destructions. She received referral fees from the plastic surgeons who performed her clients' procedures, affiliate commissions from the products they promoted during their transformations, and coaching fees for teaching them how to manage their family situations. Madison had turned family rejection into a business model. But as I researched Madison's operation, I also discovered something that gave me hope. Several of her former clients had eventually seen through her manipulation and tried to rebuild relationships with their families. Some had written blog posts and social media confessions about being caught up in Madison's toxic influence. One particularly powerful testimonial came from a young woman named Sarah Chin, who had gone through a transformation similar to what Riley was planning. Sarah had spent $50,000 on surgeries to fix her Asian features, and had cut contact with her traditional parents for 2 years. Madison convinced me that my family was holding me back, that their values and appearance were limiting my potential. It took me losing everything, my savings, my authentic relationships, my sense of self, to realize that I'd been manipulated into destroying the people who actually loved me. Sarah had eventually reconciled with her family and started a support group for other young women recovering from what she called transformation trauma. She'd also begun documenting Madison's methods and their psychological impact on vulnerable young people. I reached out to Sarah and explained my situation with Riley. She agreed to meet with me, and our conversation gave me insights I couldn't have gained anywhere else. "Your daughter is in what we call the honeymoon phase of transformation culture," Sarah explained. "She's getting constant validation for rejecting her family, constant encouragement for planning dramatic changes. Right now, the community around Madison is giving her everything she thinks she wants: approval, attention, a sense of belonging." "How did you realize it was wrong?" "When I actually got the surgeries and realized they didn't fix the deeper problems. When I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, not the improved version of myself I'd been promised. When I realized that the people celebrating my transformation didn't actually know or care about me as a person." Sarah explained that many of Madison's clients eventually experienced a psychological crash when they realized that changing their appearance didn't solve their emotional issues. The same insecurities that drove them to reject their families often remained after their transformations, leaving them isolated and still unhappy. The tragedy is that by the time most people realize what they've lost, they've burned bridges with the people who could actually help them heal. But Sarah also believed that early intervention was possible, especially if family members were persistent and strategic about showing unconditional love while exposing the manipulation their loved ones were experiencing. "Your daughter needs to see that the community she's joined is built on lies and exploitation. But she also needs to see that you represent something real and valuable that she's throwing away." After talking with Sarah, I realized that fighting for Riley wasn't just about saving my relationship with my daughter. It was about protecting her from a system that was designed to exploit her insecurities and isolate her from genuine relationships. Madison Pierce and her transformation cult had convinced Riley that I was the enemy, that family love was a limitation, that surgical self-improvement was the path to happiness. But with the right approach, I could show Riley what she was really choosing between artificial validation from strangers versus authentic love from family. The question was whether I could reach her before she went too far down Madison's path to find her way back. While I'd been focused on understanding Madison Pierce's influence on Riley, Elena Vasquez had been investigating another important figure in my daughter's life, someone I'd barely known existed until recently. His name was Derek Chen, and he'd become much more than just another influencer in Riley's circle. Derek was 24 years old, with over 500,000 followers across various social platforms. On the surface, he appeared to be everything Riley aspired to: wealthy, attractive, successful in the digital marketing world. But Elena's investigation revealed a much darker reality. Derek had started dating Riley 3 months ago, around the same time her rejection of me had intensified. At first, I'd assumed this was coincidence, but Elena's findings suggested Derek's involvement was much more calculated and sinister. Derek specialized in what he called lifestyle optimization coaching for young influencers. His business model involved identifying rising social media personalities with insecurities about their backgrounds, then offering to help them upgrade their personal brands by distancing themselves from anything that didn't serve their image. Elena had uncovered a pattern in Derek's relationships. Over the past 3 years, he'd dated at least 6 different young women, all aspiring influencers, all from modest backgrounds. In every case, he'd coached them to cut ties with their families while building their online presence around fictional backgrounds. His method was sophisticated and psychologically manipulative. Derek would shower his targets with attention and expensive gifts, making them feel special and chosen. Then he'd gradually introduce criticism of their family situations, framing it as professional advice rather than personal preference. "Your father's appearance doesn't match your brand aesthetic," he told Riley during one of their early dates, according to screenshots Elena had obtained. Successful influencers need to be strategic about their family associations. Derek had convinced Riley that her reluctance to feature me in her content was actually smart business thinking. He'd validated her worst impulses while making her feel sophisticated for prioritizing her career over family sentiment. But Derek's manipulation went deeper than business advice. Elena discovered that he'd been systematically isolating Riley from anyone who might challenge his influence over her. He'd encouraged her conflicts with me, celebrated her decision to change her name, and supported her plans for extensive cosmetic surgery. Most disturbingly, Derek had been documenting Riley's transformation process for his own content. He was creating a case study about helping young influencers overcome genetic and social limitations, using Riley's rejection of me as an example of successful family optimization. Elena showed me videos Derek had posted to his premium subscriber content, where he analyzed Riley's before and after photos and praised her decision to transcend her genetic inheritance. He was literally profiting from my daughter's shame about her appearance and her relationship with me. But the investigation also revealed Derek's true motivations, which went far beyond professional coaching. Elena had traced his financial situation and discovered that Derek was deeply in debt, maintaining his wealthy lifestyle through credit cards and loans. He was using his relationships with young influencers to access their earning potential and family resources. Derek had convinced Riley to take out student loans to fund her cosmetic procedures, promising that the increased earning potential from her improved appearance would quickly pay off the debt. But Elena discovered that Derek was taking a percentage of Riley's earnings as a management fee, and had convinced her to sign contracts that gave him control over her social media accounts and sponsorship deals. Essentially, Derek was grooming Riley to become his personal income stream while manipulating her into destroying her relationship with anyone who might protect her from exploitation. The pattern was consistent across all of Derek's relationships. He'd identify young women with family money or earning potential, isolate them from their support systems, convince them to take on debt for self-improvement projects, then position himself as their manager and romantic partner while taking control of their finances. Two of his previous girlfriends had eventually realized they were being manipulated, but only after losing tens of thousands of dollars and damaging their family relationships beyond repair. One had attempted suicide when she realized the extent of Derek's deception. Elena also discovered that Derek had been researching my financial situation, trying to determine whether Riley might have access to family money. He'd been encouraging her to maintain just enough contact with me to potentially inherit or access any assets I might have, while simultaneously coaching her to reject me emotionally and socially. Derek didn't know about my lottery winnings, but he suspected I had more resources than my modest lifestyle suggested. He'd been pressuring Riley to ask me for larger amounts of money, framing it as finally getting something back from years of genetic disadvantage. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. Derek had taken Riley's natural insecurities about her appearance and my accident, then amplified them into a complete rejection of our family bond. He'd convinced her that loving me was holding her back, that my presence in her life was a professional liability, that changing her appearance was essential for her happiness and success. But Derek had also made a crucial mistake. His manipulation was based on the assumption that I was a powerless single father with limited resources to fight back. He'd calculated that Riley's earning potential was worth more than any resistance I might offer to his influence over her. Derek had no idea that the man he'd been coaching his girlfriend to reject had $12 million and the motivation to use those resources to protect his daughter from predators. Elena's investigation had given me everything I needed to understand Derek's methods and motivations. But more importantly, it had shown me that Riley's rejection of me wasn't entirely her own choice. She was being manipulated by someone who saw her family relationships as obstacles to his own profit. The question now was how to expose Derek's manipulation without driving Riley deeper into his control. I needed to show her what was really happening without triggering her defensive mechanisms or giving Derek an opportunity to further isolate her from reality. But I also realized that Derek represented the most immediate threat to Riley's well-being. Madison Pierce was a toxic influence, but Derek was actively exploiting my daughter financially and emotionally. If I was going to save Riley from this world she'd fallen into, Derek had to be my first target. And with the resources I now had available, I was confident I could outmaneuver a small-time manipulator who preyed on vulnerable young women. The question was whether Riley would recognize the truth when I revealed it, or whether Derek's psychological control was already too strong to break. Elena's investigation into Derek's background revealed something that made my blood run cold. Derek wasn't just manipulating Riley for her current earning potential, he was planning something much more elaborate and devastating. Through careful surveillance and digital forensics, Elena had uncovered Derek's long-term strategy for Riley. He'd been systematically building a legal case to gain control over her finances and career decisions, similar to a conservatorship arrangement but disguised as a business partnership. Derek had convinced Riley to sign a series of contracts over the past 3 months, each one seemingly innocent but collectively giving him unprecedented control over her life. There was a brand management agreement that made him her exclusive representative for all business deals. A content creation partnership that gave him ownership rights to her social media accounts and intellectual property. And most recently, a lifestyle optimization contract that designated him as her wellness coordinator, with authority to make medical and financial decisions in her best interest. Elena showed me the contracts, which were written in dense legal language that would be difficult for a 19-year-old to fully understand. Buried in the fine print were clauses that essentially made Derek Riley's legal guardian for all matters related to her career development and personal optimization. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter has signed away her autonomy without realizing it. Derek can legally prevent her from making any major decisions without his approval, including financial transactions, medical procedures, and even living arrangements. But the most sinister discovery was Derek's ultimate plan for Riley. Elena had found communications between Derek and a private medical facility in Mexico that specialized in extreme cosmetic procedures. Derek had been planning to take Riley there for a complete facial reconstruction that would cost over $100,000. The procedures weren't just about changing her appearance, they were designed to make her completely unrecognizable. Derek had told the clinic that Riley suffered from severe body dysmorphic disorder and needed extensive surgery to address her psychological distress about her appearance. The medical facility didn't require the same oversight and safety protocols as American surgeries. Derek could essentially authorize any procedures he deemed necessary for Riley's wellness, regardless of medical necessity or Riley's actual consent in the moment. Elena believed Derek was planning to take Riley to Mexico once he'd isolated her completely from her support system and gained full legal control over her decisions. The extensive surgery would serve multiple purposes. It would make Riley financially dependent on him for recovery costs, physically dependent during the lengthy healing process, and psychologically dependent as she dealt with the trauma of such extreme body modification. This isn't about helping your daughter become an influencer, Elena explained. This is about creating complete dependency so Derek can control every aspect of her life and finances indefinitely. But Elena had also discovered something else that explained Derek's confidence in his plan. He'd been researching my financial background more aggressively, and he'd found traces of the inheritance I'd been trying to keep secret. Derek didn't know the full extent of my lottery winnings, but he discovered that I'd recently come into significant family money. He was planning to use Riley as a conduit to access those resources, positioning himself as her financial manager and gradually gaining control over any inheritance or family assets she might claim. Derek's timeline was accelerating. Elena had intercepted communications indicating that he was planning to move Riley to Mexico within the next month. He'd been creating a sense of urgency around her cosmetic procedures, telling her that delaying surgery would hurt her career momentum and that they needed to act quickly to secure the best medical team. Riley had no idea that the romantic getaway Derek was planning was actually a trip designed to trap her in a foreign country where she'd have no legal protection and no access to anyone who might help her. The manipulation was so complete that Riley was actually excited about the trip. Derek had convinced her that the Mexico facility was where serious influencers went for high-end cosmetic work, that getting surgery there would elevate her status in the social media world. Elena showed me text messages where Riley had told friends about her upcoming transformation journey with Derek, describing it as the most important step in her career development. She was anticipating the surgery that Derek was planning to use to control her completely. But Elena had also found something that gave me hope. In Riley's communications with Derek, there were small signs that she was beginning to question some aspects of their relationship. She'd expressed concerns about the cost of the procedures and wondered whether she was moving too fast with such dramatic changes. Derek had been pushing back against these concerns aggressively, telling Riley that her hesitation was self-sabotage and that successful people didn't let fear hold them back from necessary improvements. But the fact that Riley was having doubts suggested that some part of her still retained independent judgment. "Your daughter is beginning to feel overwhelmed by Derek's pressure," Elena observed. "This could be an opportunity to reach her before he moves her out of the country." I realized that I was facing a narrow window of opportunity. If Derek succeeded in taking Riley to Mexico, I might lose her forever, not just to estrangement, but to a form of psychological and financial captivity that could destroy her completely. But I also knew that directly confronting Derek or trying to convince Riley that she was being manipulated would likely backfire. Derek had spent months conditioning her to see any criticism of their relationship as evidence that people were jealous of her success or trying to hold her back. I needed a different approach. I needed to expose Derek's true nature in a way that would be undeniable, while also showing Riley that she had alternatives to the path he was leading her down. With $12 million at my disposal, I had resources that Derek couldn't match and options he couldn't anticipate. But I also had something more valuable: genuine love for my daughter and a determination to protect her from someone who saw her as nothing more than a source of profit and control. The question was whether I could outmaneuver Derek before he succeeded in taking Riley beyond my reach. And whether Riley still had enough of her real self left to recognize the truth when I revealed it. The battle for my daughter's life was about to begin, and I was fighting against someone who had no conscience and no limits in his willingness to exploit a vulnerable young woman. But I wasn't going to let him win. While I was planning my approach to expose Derek and save Riley, something happened that reminded me why this fight was worth having. My neighbor Sarah Martinez, who I'd barely spoken to in months due to my isolation and depression over Riley's rejection, knocked on my door on a rainy Tuesday evening. Sarah was a single mother of two, working as a nurse at the local hospital. Her husband had died in military service 3 years ago, and she'd been struggling to raise her kids alone while dealing with mounting medical bills from her own battle with breast cancer. I'd always admired Sarah from a distance. She was one of the few people in my neighborhood who had never stared at my scars or treated me differently because of my appearance. When we encountered each other at the mailbox or grocery store, she always greeted me with genuine warmth and asked about Riley's college progress. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to turn to," she said, standing on my doorstep with tears in her eyes. I invited her in and made coffee while she explained her situation. The medical bills from her cancer treatment had finally overwhelmed her finances. Despite having insurance, the specialized treatments and medications had left her with over $60,000 in debt. The hospital was threatening to garnish her wages, and she was facing the possibility of losing her house. "I've been working double shifts, picking up extra assignments, but I can't keep up with the payments and still provide for my kids. Emma needs new school clothes, and Miguel's asthma medication is so expensive." Sarah wasn't asking for money directly, but she was clearly desperate. She'd come to me because she had no one else to talk to, no family to help her, no resources left to explore. As I listened to her struggle, I thought about Riley's planned surgery, about the $15,000 she'd asked me to spend so she could erase any resemblance to me from her face. Here was a woman who had shown me nothing but kindness and respect, facing financial ruin while trying to care for her children and recover from a life-threatening illness. "Sarah, what if I told you there might be a way to solve your financial problems?" She looked at me with confusion and hope. "What do you mean?" I made a decision that felt more right than anything I'd done in months. I was going to help Sarah, not as a grand gesture or strategic move, but because it was the decent thing to do. Because her kindness to me over the years had meant something, and because her children deserved better than losing their home due to medical debt. "Sarah, I recently came into some money. More money than I know what to do with. And I want to help you." I explained about my inheritance, carefully avoiding the details about the lottery winnings, and offered to pay off all her medical debt and provide a financial cushion for her family's future. Sarah's reaction was immediate and emotional. She started crying harder, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. "Marcus, I can't accept that much help. It's too generous. I could never pay you back. You don't need to pay me back, Sarah. You've been kinder to me over the past few years than my own daughter. You've treated me like a normal person, like someone worthy of respect and friendship. Of course I have. You're a good man, Marcus. You've always been a good neighbor and a dedicated father. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Here was someone who barely knew me, affirming my worth as a person and as a father, while my own daughter was planning surgery to remove any trace of resemblance to me. Sarah, can I ask you something? When you look at me, what do you see? I see someone who's been through something difficult but hasn't let it make him bitter. I see a man who raised a daughter alone and worked hard to give her opportunities. I see someone who takes beautiful photographs and has always been willing to help his neighbors. You don't see the scars? The damaged face that embarrasses people? Sarah looked at me with genuine surprise. Marcus, is that what you think people see when they look at you? It's what my daughter sees. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd told her about Riley's rejection. Marcus, your daughter is 19 years old and caught up in a world that values all the wrong things. That doesn't mean her opinion reflects reality or defines your worth as a person. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah and I talked about families, about children who lose their way, about the difference between love and approval. She told me about her own struggles with her teenage daughter Emma, who had gone through a phase of being embarrassed by their modest lifestyle and her father's military service. Kids sometimes need to reject everything about their upbringing before they can appreciate what they had, Sarah explained. Emma used to be ashamed that her friends knew her dad died in combat instead of in some glamorous way. She wanted me to tell people he was a business executive or something more impressive. How did you handle that? I kept loving her and kept being proud of who her father was. Eventually, she realized that having a hero for a father was actually something special, not something to hide. Sarah's perspective helped me understand something important about Riley's behavior. My daughter's rejection wasn't necessarily permanent or irreversible. It might be a phase of development that she needed to go through before she could appreciate the value of authentic relationships and genuine love. But Sarah also understood the immediate danger Riley was in with Derek's manipulation. Marcus, this man is isolating your daughter and planning to take her to another country for unnecessary surgery. That's not normal relationship behavior. That's predatory. I know. I'm trying to figure out how to protect her without driving her further away. Maybe the answer isn't protecting her from a distance. Maybe it's showing her what real love and support look like by helping other people. Sarah's suggestion was insightful. Instead of fighting Derek directly or trying to convince Riley that she was being manipulated, maybe I needed to demonstrate the values I wanted her to remember by living them publicly and consistently. That evening, I not only paid off Sarah's medical debt but also set up an education fund for her children and arranged for her mortgage to be paid in full. But I did it all anonymously, through a foundation I established for helping families dealing with medical financial crises. Sarah never knew the money came specifically from me, only that her situation had been resolved by a family assistance program that had somehow learned about her circumstances. But word spread in our neighborhood about Sarah's good fortune, and people began talking about the mysterious benefactor who was helping local families in need. I started receiving information about other neighbors facing similar crises, elderly people choosing between medication and food, families struggling with unexpected medical bills, single parents working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Someone who helped people and someone who exploited them. I realized I had found a way to use my inheritance that would honor the man who'd raised me and maybe eventually show Riley what really mattered in life. Instead of trying to buy her love or compete with Derek's manipulation, I was going to demonstrate the kind of person I'd always tried to be. And maybe, if I was patient and persistent, Riley would eventually notice the difference between someone who helped people and someone who exploited them. 2 weeks after helping Sarah, I received a phone call that I wasn't expecting. The voice on the other end was young, nervous, and vaguely familiar. Mr. Sullivan? This is Chloe Williams. I used to be Riley's best friend. Chloe. I remembered her from Riley's high school years, a sweet, intelligent girl who had been part of Riley's inner circle until sometime during senior year. I'd always wondered what had happened to their friendship, but Riley had become secretive about her social life around that time. "Chloe, it's good to hear from you. How are you doing?" "I'm okay, but Mr. Sullivan, I'm calling because I'm worried about Riley." "Really worried?" Chloe explained that she'd been following Riley's social media transformation over the past year with growing concern. As someone who had known Riley before her obsession with appearance and social media success, Chloe could see how dramatically her former friend had changed. "Mr. Sullivan, the Riley I knew in high school cared about other people. She tutored younger students, volunteered at animal shelters, wanted to study environmental science. The person posting online now, it's like she's become someone completely different." "What happened between you two, Chloe?" "Riley never explained why you stopped being friends." "That's partly why I'm calling. I think you need to know what really happened, because it shows how long this has been going on." Chloe asked if we could meet in person, saying there were things about Riley's transformation that I needed to understand. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, far from campus where Derek or Riley's current friends might see us. When Chloe arrived, I barely recognized her. The confident, outgoing teenager I remembered had become a more reserved young woman, but there was a maturity and authenticity about her that reminded me of the values I tried to instill in Riley. "Mr. Sullivan, I need to tell you about what happened junior year of high school, because that's when everything started changing for Riley." Chloe explained that Riley's transformation had begun much earlier than I'd realized. During their junior year, Riley had been accepted into an exclusive social media mentorship program run by Madison Pierce. The program promised to teach teenagers how to build their personal brands and monetize their online presence. At first, it seemed like a great opportunity. Riley was excited about learning business skills and building a following. But Madison's program wasn't just about social media, it was about completely reinventing yourself. Madison had taught her students that authenticity was a liability in the influencer world, that success required crafting a perfect image that might have little to do with their actual lives and backgrounds. Madison would review our family photos and social media posts, pointing out everything that didn't serve our brand aesthetic. She told Riley that having a father with facial scars was a narrative complication that would limit her growth potential. She said what? Madison's exact words were that successful influencers needed to either hide family members who didn't enhance their image or find ways to turn family challenges into inspiring content. Since Riley didn't want to exploit your accident for sympathy content, Madison suggested she minimize your presence in her online life. Chloe had initially gone along with Madison's coaching, but she'd become uncomfortable when the program began encouraging students to distance themselves from friends and family members who didn't support their transformation goals. Madison started analyzing all our relationships, deciding who was worth keeping and who was holding us back. She told Riley that I was too ordinary looking to be featured in her content, that having friends who weren't also influencers would hurt her credibility. "Is that why your friendship ended?" "Partly. But the real break came when I started questioning Madison's methods. I asked Riley if she really thought it was right to hide you from her followers, to pretend her family situation was different than it actually was. Chloe had tried to remind Riley of the values they'd shared in high school, the importance of loyalty, authenticity, and treating people with kindness regardless of their appearance or social status. Riley told me I was jealous of her success and that I was trying to sabotage her because I wasn't brave enough to transform myself. Madison had taught her to see any criticism of the program as evidence that people were threatened by her growth. The friendship had ended when Chloe refused to participate in creating content that mocked ordinary people and families. Riley had chosen Madison's approval over Chloe's friendship, and they hadn't spoken since graduation. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been watching Riley's content for months, and I can see that the coaching has gotten much more extreme. The things she posts about families and genetics, the way she talks about transcending her background, it's not the person I used to know." But Chloe had called me for a specific reason. She'd been attending the same college as Riley, though they moved in completely different social circles now. Recently, she'd become aware of Derek's presence in Riley's life and was alarmed by what she'd observed. "Mr. Sullivan, Derek isn't just Riley's boyfriend. He's controlling every aspect of her life. Her schedule, her finances, her social interactions, everything goes through him. Chloe had witnessed several interactions between Derek and Riley that concerned her. She'd seen Derek become angry when Riley talked to other people without his permission, watched him monitor her phone conversations, observed him making decisions about her appearance and behavior. Last week, I saw them at a restaurant near campus. Riley was crying, and Derek was lecturing her about something. When she tried to leave, he grabbed her arm and forced her to sit back down. That's not normal relationship behavior. Chloe believed that Derek was emotionally and potentially physically abusive, but she also knew that Riley was so isolated from her real support system that she had no one to turn to for help. Riley used to be able to think for herself, to question things that didn't feel right. Now she just repeats whatever Derek or Madison tells her. It's like she's lost the ability to form her own opinions. But Chloe had more specific concerns about Riley's immediate safety. Through mutual friends, she'd heard about Derek's plans to take Riley to Mexico for extensive cosmetic procedures. Mr. Sullivan, the people talking about this trip, they're worried. The procedures Derek is planning aren't normal cosmetic surgery. They're talking about completely changing Riley's facial structure, making her unrecognizable. Do you think Riley fully understands what Derek is planning? I think Riley is so focused on pleasing Derek and advancing her career that she's not questioning the details. She trusts him to make decisions that are in her best interest. Chloe's information confirmed what Elena had discovered through her investigation, but it also provided a personal perspective on how Derek's manipulation was affecting Riley's daily life and decision-making ability. Mr. Sullivan, I know Riley hurt you badly. I know she said terrible things about you and treated you horribly. But the person doing those things isn't really her. It's who she's been programmed to become by people who are using her. What do you think I should do? I think Riley needs to see that there are people who care about her for who she really is, not for what she can do for their careers or bank accounts. She needs to remember what authentic relationships feel like. Chloe's call had given me something invaluable, an ally who knew Riley's true character and could see through the influencer persona to the person I'd raised. But more importantly, Chloe had reminded me that the Riley I'd loved for 19 years was still there somewhere, buried under layers of manipulation and toxic coaching. The question was whether I could reach her before Derek succeeded in taking her beyond the reach of anyone who might remind her of who she used to be. After my conversation with Chloe, I knew I was running out of time. Elena's surveillance had confirmed that Derek was accelerating his timeline. He'd booked flights to Mexico for the following month and had been pressuring Riley to finalize the surgical procedures he'd planned for her. But I also realized that any direct confrontation with Derek would likely backfire. He'd spent months conditioning Riley to see any criticism of their relationship as evidence of jealousy or sabotage. If I accused him of manipulation, Riley would probably interpret it as her father trying to control her life out of selfishness. I needed a different approach. I needed to expose Derek's true nature in a way that Riley couldn't dismiss or rationalize. And I needed to do it publicly, so that Derek couldn't spin the revelations as personal attacks from a bitter father. Dr. Amanda Foster had given me insights into the psychology of people trapped in manipulative relationships. The key was creating cognitive dissonance, situations where the victim's observed reality conflicted so dramatically with their manipulator's narrative that they were forced to question everything they'd been told. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter needs to see Derek fail to live up to his own promises and standards. She needs to witness him being exposed by sources she can't dismiss as biased against her. Elena and I developed a comprehensive plan that would reveal Derek's history, methods, and current schemes through multiple channels that Riley trusted. The goal wasn't just to expose Derek, but to show Riley that she had alternatives to the path he was leading her down. First, Elena had been building relationships with Derek's previous victims, the young women he'd manipulated and exploited before moving on to Riley. 3 of them were willing to speak publicly about their experiences, and their stories formed a clear pattern of Derek's predatory behavior. Sarah Chen, the young woman who tried to fix her Asian features under Derek's coaching, had agreed to create a detailed video testimonial about her experience. Her story was particularly powerful because it showed the long-term psychological damage caused by Derek's manipulation. Elena arranged for Sarah's video to be promoted through social media channels that Riley followed, but in a way that would seem organic rather than targeted. The video gained traction in communities discussing influencer culture and cosmetic surgery, making it likely that Riley would encounter it naturally. But I also wanted to demonstrate positive alternatives to the world Derek represented. Using my inheritance, I'd been quietly establishing a foundation that provided scholarships and support for young people pursuing authentic careers in media and communications. The foundation specifically helped students who wanted to use social media platforms for positive purposes, environmental advocacy, mental health awareness, educational content, social justice causes. I wanted to show Riley that influence could be used for meaningful purposes beyond self-promotion and appearance obsession. I arranged for several scholarship recipients to be featured in local media, highlighting their work and the foundation's mission. The coverage emphasized the importance of using digital platforms to help others rather than just building personal brands. The third element of my plan involved exposing Derek's financial schemes. Elena had gathered evidence of his fraudulent contracts and exploitative business practices. But rather than confronting Derek directly, we arranged for this information to reach the authorities through official channels. The State Attorney General's office had been investigating predatory practices in the influencer coaching industry, and Elena made sure they received detailed documentation of Derek's operations. We also provided information to the Federal Trade Commission about his undisclosed financial arrangements with young influencers. The goal was to create legal pressure that would force Derek to deal with external scrutiny while making it harder for him to maintain his facade of success and legitimacy. But the most important part of my plan was personal. I was going to use the annual photography exhibition at the local community center to showcase a project I'd been working on for months, portraits of people who'd overcome significant challenges and used their experiences to help others. The exhibition would feature Sarah Martinez and her children, showing a family that had triumphed over medical and financial crises. It would include portraits of other neighbors I'd helped through my foundation, demonstrating the beauty and dignity of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Most importantly, the exhibition would include a self-portrait, the first time I'd photographed myself since my accident 22 years ago. The image would show my scars clearly and honestly, but in a context that emphasized strength, resilience, and the choice to help others despite personal struggles. I'd arranged for the exhibition to be covered by local media and promoted through social channels that Riley followed. The coverage would focus on the stories behind the portraits and the foundation's work supporting families in crisis. Chloe had agreed to attend the exhibition and share information about it through her own social media accounts, making it likely that Riley would become aware of the event and the recognition my work was receiving. The combination of Derek's legal troubles, testimonials from his victims, positive coverage of meaningful work, and public recognition of my own contributions to the community would create a stark contrast between Derek's exploitation and my genuine efforts to help people. But I also knew that even the best evidence might not be enough to break through Derek's psychological control over Riley. She'd been conditioned to dismiss criticism and to prioritize her career ambitions over other considerations. So I was prepared for the possibility that Riley might choose Derek's promises over her family's love, might decide that surgical transformation was worth the risks Derek was exposing her to. If that happened, would accept her choice while making sure she knew that real love and support would be available if she ever decided she wanted it. But I was also prepared to fight for my daughter with every resource at my disposal. Because the Riley I'd raised was worth fighting for, even if she couldn't see that herself right now. The confrontation was coming, whether Riley was ready for it or not. And when it arrived, I wanted to make sure she had all the information she needed to make a truly informed decision about her future. The photography exhibition opened on a Thursday evening in early October. I'd been working toward this moment for weeks, knowing it might be my last chance to reach Riley before Derek took her to Mexico. What I didn't expect was that Derek himself would force the confrontation I'd been preparing for. The community center was packed with more people than I'd ever seen at a local art event. Word had spread about the foundation's work and the stories behind my portraits. Local media was there, along with photography students from the college and neighbors who'd heard about the exhibition through social media. I was standing near my self-portrait, talking with a reporter about the foundation's mission, when I noticed a commotion near the entrance. Riley had arrived with Derek, and they were clearly not planning a quiet visit. Derek was dressed in his usual expensive clothes, projecting the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. Riley looked nervous and uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure why they were there but had been convinced to come along. They moved through the exhibition space, Derek making loud comments about the amateur photography and the depressing subject matter. He was performing for Riley and anyone else who would listen, establishing himself as someone too sophisticated for local community events. This is exactly the kind of small-town thinking that limits people's potential, Derek announced, loud enough for half the room to hear. Celebrating ordinary people doing ordinary things instead of inspiring real achievement and transformation. I watched Riley's face as Derek disparaged the portraits of Sarah Martinez and her children, the elderly veteran who'd overcome homelessness, the single mother who'd started a tutoring program for at-risk kids. Her expression showed discomfort with Derek's cruelty, but she didn't contradict him. Then they reached my self-portrait. Derek stared at the image for a long moment, taking in the careful lighting that emphasized rather than hid my scars, the direct gaze that conveyed self-acceptance rather than shame, the composition that presented my appearance as part of my story rather than something to apologize for. "Now this is interesting," Derek said, his voice dripping with calculated cruelty. A before photo that someone forgot to follow up with the after transformation. Riley's face went pale. She realized her father had created this exhibition, had put himself on display in a way that directly challenged everything Derek had taught her about image management and aesthetic optimization. "Derek, maybe we should go," she whispered. "No, this is perfect. This is exactly what I've been trying to teach you about the importance of taking control of your genetics and your image." Derek positioned himself in front of my portrait like he was giving a lecture, drawing attention from other visitors. "Look at this example of someone who accepted genetic damage instead of fixing it. 20 years of choosing to look like a victim instead of investing in improvement. This is what happens when people lack the vision and courage to optimize their appearance." The room had gone quiet. People were staring at Derek with expressions of shock and disgust. But Derek was so focused on performing for Riley that he didn't notice the hostile audience he was creating. "Riley, this is your genetic inheritance if you don't follow through with our transformation plan. This is why the Mexico procedures are so important, to make sure you never have to settle for looking like this." That's when Chloe stepped forward from the crowd where she'd been listening to Derek's performance. "Excuse me, but are you talking about Marcus Sullivan? The photographer who created this exhibition?" Derek turned to Chloe with the condescending smile he used when he thought he was dealing with someone naive. "Yes, and I'm trying to help this young woman understand the importance of not accepting genetic limitations. Are you familiar with optimization theory?" "I'm familiar with Marcus Sullivan. He's Riley's father." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. His confident expression collapsed as he realized he'd been publicly insulting the father of the woman he was trying to control, in front of an audience of people who knew and respected me. But Chloe wasn't finished. "Riley, your dad has been helping families in this community for months. The woman in that portrait? He paid her medical bills when she was facing foreclosure. The veteran in that photo? Your dad helped him get housing and healthcare. This whole exhibition is showcasing people your father has supported through his foundation." Riley stared at Chloe, then at the portraits around the room, pieces of information clicking together in a way that Derek hadn't prepared her for. "That's impossible," Derek said, his voice losing its confident tone. "Riley's father is a failed photographer who works retail jobs. He doesn't have the resources for charitable work." "Really?" Chloe pulled out her phone and showed Derek the news coverage of my foundation's work. "Because it looks like he's donated over $1 million to help local families this year." Derek's face went white as he read the headlines and saw the photographs of check presentations and family testimonials. He was realizing that everything he'd assumed about my financial situation was wrong, that the man he'd been coaching Riley to reject had resources that dwarfed his own fraudulent lifestyle. "Riley," Chloe continued, "your father has been using his money to help people who really need it, while Derek has been trying to convince you to spend your money changing yourself to meet his standards. Don't you see the difference?" Riley was looking around the room with new eyes, seeing the community of people who respected and appreciated her father, understanding that Derek had been systematically lying to her about my worth and character. But Derek wasn't finished. Realizing that his manipulation was being exposed, he made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Riley, don't let them manipulate you with emotion. Your father's charity work doesn't change the fact that his appearance limits your professional potential. we still need to proceed with the Mexico plan to protect your career. That's when Sarah Chen walked up to our group, having heard Derek's name mentioned from across the room. Derek? Derek Chen? You're still doing this to people? Derek's remaining confidence evaporated as he recognized one of his previous victims, someone whose story he'd hoped would never catch up with him. Sarah, what are you doing here? I live here now. I moved back home after you destroyed my life and stole my money. Riley, this man convinced me to cut contact with my family, spend $50,000 on surgery I didn't need, and sign contracts that gave him control over my finances. He's not helping you, he's using you. Riley looked back and forth between Sarah and Derek, seeing the fear in Derek's eyes and the genuine concern in Sarah's. That's not. Sarah, you're misremembering our business relationship. I have all the contracts, Derek. All the bank records. The FBI has been very interested in your methods. Derek realized he was trapped. The community of people I'd helped, the evidence of his past crimes, the witnesses to his current manipulation, everything was colliding in a way that made his lies impossible to maintain. He grabbed Riley's arm, trying to pull her toward the exit. We're leaving. Now. Don't let them turn you against me with jealousy and lies. But Riley pulled her arm away, looking at Derek with recognition of what he really was. No, Derek. I think I need to hear what these people have to say. That's when I stepped forward and spoke to my daughter for the first time in months. Riley, you have a choice to make. You can leave with someone who's been lying to you about everything, or you can stay and learn the truth about what's been happening to you. Riley looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since her graduation day. And for just a moment, I saw the daughter I'd raised looking back at me. The silence in that room felt like it lasted forever. Riley stood between Derek and me, between the lies she'd been living and the truth she was finally starting to see. Derek's desperation was obvious now, his confident facade had crumbled completely, and he looked like a man whose carefully constructed scheme was falling apart. Riley, we need to leave right now, Derek said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. These people are trying to sabotage your transformation because they're threatened by your success. But Riley wasn't moving. She was looking around the room at the faces of people who had genuine concern for her well-being, comparing them to Derek's increasingly frantic attempts to control the situation. Sarah Chen stepped closer to Riley, speaking in the gentle voice of someone who'd been exactly where Riley was now. Riley, I know this is overwhelming. I know Derek has convinced you that people who question your transformation are enemies of your success. But I need you to understand something, I was you 2 years ago. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Riley photos from her own transformation period. Pictures of elaborate cosmetic procedures, before and after shots that emphasized dramatic changes, images of her new appearance being celebrated by Derek and his online community. Derek convinced me that changing my appearance was the key to building my career and my happiness. He helped me plan surgeries that cost me my entire inheritance and my relationship with my family. Riley studied the photos, seeing herself reflected in Sarah's story. What happened? The surgeries didn't make me happy. They made me look like someone else, but all the insecurities and problems I'd been trying to fix were still there. And Derek. Derek moved on to his next project once he'd gotten what he could from me financially. Derek tried to interrupt, but Chloe cut him off. Riley, remember who you used to be. Remember what you cared about before you met Derek and Madison. You wanted to study environmental science. You tutored kids who were struggling in school. You cried when we saw homeless animals because you wanted to help them. That was before Riley understood her potential, Derek said desperately. Before she learned how to optimize her genetics and build a real career. Real career? Elena Vasquez stepped out of the crowd, holding a folder full of documents. Mr. Chen, would you like to explain to Riley what your career management really involves? Elena opened the folder and began reading from the contracts Derek had convinced Riley to sign. Full control over all social media accounts and content creation. Exclusive management of all business relationships and financial decisions. Authority to make medical decisions in the client's best interest. Elena looked at Riley directly. Riley, these contracts essentially make Derek your legal guardian. You've signed away your right to make independent decisions about your own life. Riley's face went white as she understood what Elena was telling her. Derek, is that true? Riley, those are standard management contracts. Everyone in the industry uses similar agreements. No, they don't, Sarah said firmly. Normal management contracts don't give your manager control over your medical decisions or your personal relationships. Elena continued reading from the documents she'd gathered about Derek's financial schemes. Riley, Derek has been taking 40% of your earnings as management fees, which is twice the industry standard. He's also been using your accounts to pay for his personal expenses, rent, car payments, even dating expenses when he takes other women out. The revelation hit Riley like a physical blow. Derek had been using her money to fund his lifestyle and his pursuit of other potential victims. Derek has also been planning to take you to Mexico for procedures that aren't medically necessary and aren't covered by any legitimate insurance. The facility he's chosen has been investigated for performing unauthorized surgeries and keeping patients longer than necessary to increase billing. Riley turned to Derek with a mixture of anger and devastation. You were planning to trap me in Mexico? Riley, they're twisting everything. The Mexico facility is world-class, and the procedures are essential for your career development. Stop lying. Riley's voice cracked with emotion. Just stop lying to me. She looked around the room at the evidence of Derek's manipulation, at the people trying to protect her, at the portraits of my work helping families in need. Dad, she said, her voice small and broken, I need to understand something. The money you've been donating, the foundation work, where did that come from? I pulled out the inheritance documents that had started this whole journey and handed them to Riley. I inherited $12 million from your great-uncle Theodore. I've been using it to help people in our community who were facing crises like Sarah Martinez's medical debt. Riley stared at the paperwork, understanding that her father, the man she'd been ashamed to be photographed with, had been quietly helping dozens of families while she'd been planning to spend her money erasing her resemblance to him. $12 million? Derek didn't know about the inheritance when he started targeting you. He thought you were just the daughter of a poor photographer he could manipulate and exploit. Riley turned to Derek with growing realization. You were never helping me build my career. You were using me. Derek made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Riley, don't let them confuse you with emotions and charity work. We had a plan for your optimization. We were going to make you perfect. Perfect? Riley's voice rose with anger. You were trying to make me hate my own father so much that I'd pay to surgically remove any resemblance to him. How is that perfect? She looked at my self-portrait hanging on the wall, seeing it with new eyes. Dad has scars because he survived something terrible. He's been helping people and building something meaningful with his life. What have you built, Derek? What do you actually contribute to the world besides convincing young women to hate themselves? Derek realized he'd lost completely. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, abandoning Riley just like Sarah had warned he would when his manipulation stopped working. Riley watched him leave, then turned to face me with tears streaming down her face. Dad, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything I said, everything I did, the way I treated you. Riley. No, let me say this. You are a good man. You are a good father. And I was so caught up in hating myself that I convinced myself you were the problem. She walked over to my self-portrait and studied it carefully. You're beautiful, Dad. Not because you look perfect, but because you survived something difficult and chose to help other people instead of becoming bitter. Riley turned back to me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a child, genuine love and respect, uncomplicated by shame or social pressure. Can you forgive me? Can we try to rebuild what I threw away? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw the person I'd raised underneath all the confusion and manipulation she'd experienced. Riley, there's nothing to forgive. You're my daughter, and I love you unconditionally. That never changed, even when you couldn't see it. As we embraced for the first time in over a year, I realized that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the deepest pain. Riley had learned about authentic relationships by almost losing them. She'd learned about real beauty by almost destroying it. And she'd learned about genuine love by discovering how different it was from manipulation and exploitation. The daughter I'd raised was still there, stronger and wiser for having survived her journey into darkness and found her way back to the light. 6 months later, I was sitting in my photography studio, working on a new project that I never could have imagined a year ago. Riley was across the room, editing videos for her completely transformed social media presence, and the comfortable silence between us felt like a miracle. The first few weeks after the exhibition had been difficult for both of us. Riley had been forced to confront not just Derek's manipulation, but her own choices and the pain she'd caused. She'd spent hours going through her old social media posts, reading the cruel things she'd written about family and genetics, seeing how she'd turned other people's insecurities into content for her own benefit. "Dad, I can't believe I posted this," she'd said one evening, showing me a particularly harsh meme about genetic disadvantages. "I can't believe I thought it was funny to make people feel bad about things they couldn't control." The process of undoing Derek's psychological control had required professional help. Riley had started therapy with Dr. Amanda Foster, working through the body dysmorphic disorder and family rejection issues that had made her vulnerable to manipulation in the first place. "I realized that I wasn't actually confident about my appearance," Riley had explained to me after one of her sessions. "I was so insecure about looking like you that I convinced myself the problem was your appearance instead of my own self-hatred." Dr. Foster had helped Riley understand that Derek and Madison hadn't created her insecurities, they'd exploited existing fears and amplified them into destructive behaviors. Riley's shame about my scars had been rooted in her own fear of being imperfect, of not meeting impossible standards of beauty that social media had normalized. But the therapy had also revealed something more positive. Underneath all the appearance obsession and family rejection, Riley still had the values I tried to teach her. She still cared about helping others, about using her talents for meaningful purposes, about building authentic relationships based on character rather than image. The transformation of her social media presence had been gradual but dramatic. Instead of posting perfect selfies and beauty tips, Riley began documenting her recovery from Derek's manipulation. She shared her story about nearly losing her family to appearance obsession, about the dangers of cosmetic surgery addiction, about recognizing and escaping manipulative relationships. Her honesty about her mistakes and her journey towards self-acceptance had resonated with thousands of young people who were struggling with similar issues. But more importantly, Riley was using her platform to promote causes she genuinely cared about: environmental conservation, mental health awareness, support for families dealing with medical trauma. "I want to use my influence to help people feel better about themselves, not worse," she told me. "I want to show people that real beauty comes from kindness and authenticity, not from surgical perfection." Riley had also made amends to the people she'd hurt during her transformation period. She'd reached out to Chloe and apologized for choosing toxic influences over genuine friendship. She'd contacted Sarah Martinez and asked if she could volunteer with the Foundation's family support programs. Most importantly, she'd publicly apologized to me on her social media accounts, explaining how her appearance obsession had led her to reject the father who'd sacrificed everything for her well-being. The response to her apology had been overwhelmingly positive. Her followers had shared their own stories about family relationships damaged by social media pressure, about parents they'd taken for granted, about the difference between love and approval. But the most meaningful change had been in our personal relationship. Riley had moved back home while finishing her college degree, choosing to study social work instead of continuing her influencer career full-time. She wanted to help other young people who were struggling with body image issues and family estrangement. "I want to do what you do, Dad. I want to help people who are in crisis, who need someone to show them that they're valuable regardless of their circumstances." Riley had also become involved in my photography work, helping me document the stories of families we'd helped through the foundation. She discovered that she had a real talent for connecting with people who were struggling, for making them feel comfortable and valued during their most vulnerable moments. Working together had rebuilt our relationship in ways that went deeper than our previous father-daughter bond. We'd become genuine partners in meaningful work, united by shared values and a commitment to helping others. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd originally envisioned. With Riley's help and social media expertise, we'd been able to reach more families in need and connect with other organizations doing similar work. The photography exhibitions had become regular events that raised awareness and funds for various community support programs. But the most rewarding aspect of our work together was seeing Riley embrace her authentic self. She'd learned to see her resemblance to me as something to be proud of rather than ashamed of. She'd stopped wearing makeup designed to hide our shared features and had begun taking pride in the strength and character reflected in our faces. "I used to think looking like you was a genetic curse," she'd told me recently. "Now I realize it's a genetic blessing. I look like someone who survived something difficult and chose to help other people. That's the kind of beauty I want to represent." On this particular afternoon, Riley was working on a video series about recognizing manipulation in relationships, sharing her experience with Derek as a cautionary tale for other young women. Her content was no longer about achieving physical perfection, it was about developing emotional strength and maintaining authentic relationships. "Dad, can I show you something?" Riley asked, looking up from her laptop. She'd been working on a special project for weeks, something she'd been secretive about. When she turned her screen toward me, I saw a beautifully edited video montage of our work together over the past 6 months. The video showed us photographing families, delivering support checks, volunteering at community events. But it also included personal moments, conversations in our kitchen, quiet times working side by side, moments of genuine connection and mutual respect. The caption Riley had written brought tears to my eyes. "6 months ago, I was planning to surgically remove any resemblance to my father because I was ashamed of his scars. Today, I'm proud to look like the strongest, kindest, most generous man I know." Real beauty isn't about perfect features, it's about perfect love, the kind my dad has shown me my entire life. "Riley, this is beautiful. I want people to understand what I almost threw away. I want other young people to think twice before they let appearance obsession destroy their relationships with people who truly love them." As I watched my daughter use her platform to promote values of authenticity and family loyalty, I realized that our journey through pain and estrangement had ultimately made both of us stronger. Riley had learned about real beauty by almost destroying it. I'd learned about unconditional love by having it tested to its limits. The $12 million had given me the resources to fight for my daughter and help our community. But the real treasure had been discovering that the person I'd raised was still there, waiting to emerge from underneath the confusion and manipulation she'd experienced. That evening, Riley and I attended another family that our foundation had helped, a young father who'd been injured in a workplace accident and was struggling with depression about his changed appearance. As I watched Riley talk with his teenage daughter about accepting and loving parents despite their physical challenges, I understood that our story had come full circle. Riley was now the one helping other families heal from the kind of pain we'd experienced. She was using her influence to promote authentic beauty and genuine love, teaching young people that family relationships were more valuable than social media metrics. At 53 years old, I'd learned that fatherhood isn't about being perfect or meeting your children's expectations. It's about loving them consistently, standing by them when they make mistakes, and being ready to welcome them back when they're ready to come home. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, your children learn to see you not as you appear to be, but as you really are, scars and all, imperfect but authentic, ordinary but loving. That kind of recognition, that kind of acceptance, is the most beautiful thing in the world. Riley had taught me that real family bonds can survive almost anything, including rejection, manipulation, and the pressure to be someone you're not. Love that runs deep enough will always find a way back to the surface, even when it seems lost forever. As we drove home that night, working together in comfortable silence, I realized that the face I saw in the mirror, scarred but peaceful, aged but purposeful, was exactly the face I was meant to have. And I was grateful that my daughter had learned to see it the same way. The end.